Be here now.
We will now have the singing of hymn number 1, Holy, Holy, Holy. Thank you, Linda, and also Drake of Traditional Medicinals for arranging our marriage this morning. Thank you to New Hope Communications for bringing us together this way. You and I find ourselves in an interesting predicament. We took birth. And that's what's common to all of us. We did seem to have taken a birth. And most of us really don't know what the hell we're doing here. We have a lot of cute, gimmicky ideas. But basically, it's a mystery. So the interesting question is, how do you live with a mystery? Because you and I are facing exactly the same situation at that level. Now, when we took birth, I mean, that turns out to be an illusion, but we won't go that far out into mysticism today. We'll just make believe you really did take birth. Because you think you did, and that's what's important at this moment. If you don't understand my remarks, you can get the tape. Because I'd rather go out than stay in. And what Linda apparently kindly forgot to tell you was that I got thrown out of Harvard in '63. So you're not hearing a legitimate person. Keep that in mind. I'm not Senator Hatch, nor am I Dr. Eisenberg. So you've got a great spectrum this weekend. Now, the predicament of us in incarnation is unique. Each of us, for some strange reason, which in the East we call karma, the way the karmic ball bounces, you and I have each ended up with a unique incarnation. That is, you're standing in a different place than I am. The reality you're perceiving is different than the reality I'm perceiving. Because what you perceive is conditioned by a lot of things. In fact, everything in the universe. It's by your genetics, by your social learning, by your desire hierarchy. All of it affects your perception, the way you conceptualize the world. So you have a unique predicament within the stew in which all of us are in here together. Perhaps we all share an objective that we would like to be happy. It seems like a reasonable one to share. And the science of how to be happy is what basically religions are about. Supposedly, all social systems are geared towards that end, although it's surprising. Think about it. So many don't seem to work in that direction. Now, part of your unique incarnation is that you are sharing identity with an institution or in an institution. The natural foods, natural healing products, an industry. And that comes with a certain mythology. It comes with a certain line of credit in the culture. It comes with a certain skepticism from the culture. It comes with a burgeoning market, as Dr. Eisenberg pointed out. Historically, your industry was just about 20 years ago made up of eccentrics and weirdos. I mean, going into one of your stores then was quite a different experience. You usually had a theosophist running it. And here you are 20 years later. It's a whole new ballgame. A whole new ballgame. And so it's been happening very fast for you. And what was shared in this industry was some image that you had of yourself and which the culture has of you, of being a caring institution. That is, being concerned about health, being concerned about the environment, being concerned about the well-being of things. And that's part of your inner value system. That's what brought you to this field, instead of the military industrial complex or what other choices you had. Now, the predicament is that as long as you were starving in the business, as long as you were just scraping together, it was very easy to keep these values together. But success does a funny thing. It throws you into business. That is, it puts you into a set of mythologies about how business works that confronts some of your other values very directly and puts you in a funny kind of value conflict. Because in our culture, what is acceptable practices as good for business is not necessarily good for the soul. It's not necessarily good for your heart. It's not necessarily something that makes you happy to do. But you say, I have to do it. It's also interesting that with the credit that this industry comes with, of being a caring institution, you have the choice in the way you play your game in terms of marketing, advertising, and so on, of using up that credit or adding to it, compounding the credit. And to compound the credit means that you as an industry and you as individual members of the industry act in such a way, live in such a way, have your businesses manifest in such a way that you are indeed a caring, socially concerned, humanly concerned institution. I mean, it is interesting that it's I mean, there are spiritual people that talk about law. Like, I go to peace rallies all the time to do benefits, like speak at peace things, and I'm amazed how angry everybody is. You know, damn it, we got to have peace. I want you to be peaceful. And you begin to think, is the message part, is the medium part of the message or not? I mean, how can you spread peace if you're not a peaceful person? And how can you support an image of a caring institution if you aren't a caring person? And if your business isn't a caring business, how can you support the myth of the industry, which is a myth which if it can stand up as David to Goliath or as Gandhi to the British Empire, if it can stand up with a certain integrity and a certain kind of commitment to that deeper ideal, can be a social statement in the society in which it heals. The industry heals. It actually does what it says it's trying to do. But there's the question of whether you can afford to do that. That's what you all face every day. And if you trace our 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s scenarios, which I don't want to do in depth today because we don't have the time. But in the 60s, there was a certain kind of naive idealism that was really set forth by people from 15 to 25 years old who hadn't had much life experience. And they were so committed to what they had experienced inside, and it was manifested so broadly, carried by the minstrels like the Grateful Dead and the Beatles and the et cetera, Bob Dylan, throughout the world, that they were a force. And that force, which was multiply determined by the affluence after the Second World War, by a whole lot of by the bomb, et cetera, whatever it was, it led people that were changing and feeling this new sense of possibility to assume that the power of their love would be greater than the power of the fear that underlay the vertical institutions in which they had grown up, basically. I mean, the images of all the hippies holding hands around the Pentagon, oming so it would rise. Now, actually, only a very few people saw it rise, but that wasn't basically the issue. The issue was that the statement was being made that the Pentagon was indeed just another paper tiger. It was another social institution. Instead of there, it was there. There was an empowering of the individual human spirit. The predicament was that there were enough people who hadn't tasted whatever it was that this group had tasted that were very, very threatened by the shift in the power structure of the society. From a vertical, patriarchal society through sexual freedom, through civil rights, through beginning of the women's movement, through ecological movement, through anti-Vietnam, political justice, all these movements. And they were afraid of chaos and anarchy. And thus we have the spawning of the very, very militant conservative and fundamentalist movements in this country. And then we have 20 years, roughly, of the strengthening and the polarization of the culture. So there's an us and them in the world. And that's why the 90s are interesting, because with a centrist president, roughly, who's very pragmatic and yet has ideals, we are coming to the end of that polarization if we're very careful and very delicate about it. And as much as I don't like Orrin Hatch, here he is as your champion. And that's the reality of it. And that's what we have to learn, that we're human beings and we have different hierarchies of needs and et cetera. But here we all are, Orrin and us. Orrin and they. But what happened to all the idealists in the 70s and 80s was they started to have children and have insurance policies and want to send their kids to college and want to have health insurance, et cetera, and pretty soon they were known as the yuppies. They said, we'll use all our new consciousness If we can't transmute the system, we'll beat it. We'll do well within it. And we still have our values, we just won't manifest them directly. So I will buy my BMW, but I will not notice the homeless person on the street. And I'll somehow keep categories in my mind. I give at the office. That justifies this. But lurking in us is still that idealism overlaid by some cynicism. There is still a sense in our intuitive hearts that it is possible to have social systems of which we are a part that honor our sense of justice, our sense of compassion, our sense of equality, whatever, our sense of consciousness about resources. We could live that way. But, in fact, how many of us do? Actually, very few of us act in ways that are harmonious with these values. And the thing that bugs us is that our businesses, for all their good intention, are basically creating suffering in the world. They are creating desire. They are creating material stuff going on. Now, that's a hard statement. Most of us are living our life that way. I mean, I'm not excluding myself. We all are in this game together. Doug Thompson, who started Esprit, Doug said, the idea of socially responsible business is an oxymoron. That how can businesses be socially responsible? Because a lot of what's built in, like I have very dear friends because I'm part of a group called the Social Venture Network, which is a group of businesses that come together to try to figure out how to be responsible. So I have friends like Ben and Jerry and Anita Roddick and Gordon of the Body Shop and people from Calvert Fund and Patagonia and all these kinds of wonderful companies. And they are public images of companies that are being socially responsible in many, many, many ways. And they're good people. But yet, the products and the whole business of having a business and product are, in a funny way, they're catering to the 20% of the world population that use 80% of the resources already. Ben & Jerry's ice cream does not sell in Africa. And you can feel the edge of the frightening issue when Patagonia says, you don't need so many things, don't buy so many things, as an advertising campaign. And you say to yourself, how clever. Because the reverse thing happens. People say, okay, I won't buy so many, but they're so good to say it that when I do, I'll buy from them. And that's the interesting rip-off of being a socially conscious organization, a publicly socially conscious organization. That it has all this spin where you get an advantage from it. You can use it as a marketing gimmick. And you've got to accept the fact that you and I are people with complex motivations. We somehow balance all the different forces within us. So that for you to live out your game, your role, your play, your dance in life as a member of this industry, means that you come with a certain credit in the society. You come in a very risky, changing world condition. That's part of your unique predicament. The change I mentioned, you're going from being a kind of an eccentric group to being a mainstream group. Major change. You're living in a moment when the separation between mind and body and spirit is starting to come together. Major change. When I was a child, my mother used to say to me, Richard, finish all your roast beef and your white bread and mashed potatoes before you can have your chocolate cake. Now, for some of us who are diet conscious, the fact that a mother would, that's like child abuse. She thought she was a very good mother. She was a good Jewish mother from Newton. She was giving me the diet she thought would help. She had me on scheduled feeding. That's why I'm as weird as I am. And you know what happened to that. I mean, look at the change that's gone on that we're all part of. We used to think technology was an unadulterated good, didn't we? Boy, has that changed. I mean, not only has it produced things that are slowly destroying our capacity to stay alive because it isn't tempered with wisdom, but it's creating incredible ethical dilemmas as to how to die. Who pulls the plug when? Dr. Kevorkian's predicament. These are new ethical dilemmas created by technology. I honor technology. It synthesized LSD. So we went from thinking about another change, we've gone from thinking about the duration of life to the quality of life. Before, we were just busy surviving. We were trying to get to live beyond 45 or something. Now, suddenly, we have to think about what's your life about, not only that you live it long. We have become conscious of the unequal distribution of resources, the north-south dilemma, the skewed curves regarding economic distribution of wealth in our country, the creation of a permanent underclass. We have become increasingly conscious of non-renewable resources in the world, not sustainable, and how much we are eroding that by our very existence, by just the way we live. And most of us know that. If you came here by airplane, if you came here in any conveyance other than walking, if you came on highways made of petroleum. I mean, it's simple things. Simple things. You do it, we do it every day, all the way we live. So, these changes in our consciousness, the change in your emerging power and thus your responsibility within the social structure. The question is, where do you stand in relation to all these changes that allows you to be, you have a change in that you don't know whether the government's going to take over your industry or not. You sure as hell hope they're not. Or there'll be a delaying tactic until you're conscious enough to get a good media campaign together, to go after the aging who use all your products, who have the power in the society. But you don't know. It may all change. It may all turn to hell. Your industry may have a really hard time coming up. That's possible. There's a great story, about the farmer who had a horse, and the horse ran away, and the neighbor said to the farmer, "That's too bad." And the farmer said, "You never know." And the next day, the horse came back leading a beautiful wild stallion. And the neighbor said to the farmer, "Aren't you lucky?" And the farmer said, "You never know." And shortly after that, the farmer's son was trying to break in the stallion and ride it, and he got thrown and he broke his leg. And the neighbor said, "Isn't that too bad?" Farmer said, "You never know." Shortly thereafter, the Cossack soldiers came through recruiting all the young people, young men, for war. But they didn't take this boy because he had a broken leg. And the neighbor said, "Aren't you lucky?" And the farmer said, "You never know." And that's where you are. You never know. You never know. Okay. And the question is, where can you stand in never knowingness where you can enjoy the trip? Or are you going to be so panicked about how it comes out, so preoccupied with the end that you're going to miss the process? This is it. You didn't come to this show to get more revenue, to do duh. If I didn't have to go to this, I could be doing that. This is it. This is where you are at this moment. Your whole life was preparation for this moment. Are you blowing it by using this for that, or are you enjoying this? Is this enough? Well, if I only had another cup of coffee, if I only could take an earlier plane home, if I only get more sales, if only, then I could be here now. But what the hell? This is it. This is what you got. And if you aren't living your life as process, but only product oriented, you're screwing yourself, basically. That's a religious sermon. Like, I travel a lot, and I know many of you do too. So for years, I'm sometimes on the road 9 months a year. That's a lot. So I don't have a home because I'm part of a wandering sadhu sect, basically. My guru said you shouldn't stay in one place too long because yogis and water turn stale when they stay in one place. They get attached. So I've been moving around. So I find myself in many Ramada Inns and Hotel Sixes and stuff like that. Hiltons, Hyatts, night after night after night. And I remember years back, I was in Kansas or Iowa or somewhere in the middle. And I came into another one of those places, and I sat down in this very plastic environment in the Ramada Inn, looking at this, setting up my holy pictures on this plastic table, on the plastic couch in the plastic room with plastic reproductions. And I thought to myself, gee, only a few more weeks and I can go home. And I caught my own thought. I caught myself saying, you're not happy with this, but if you had that, and you'll have it in 2 weeks. I thought, boy, am I going to live my life like that? So I got up and I went out of the room and I closed the door and I walked down the hall and I turned around, came back, opened the door and I yelled, I'm home. And I've been home ever since. This is it. Here we are in the living room. Where could we go? I don't want to be anywhere else than this. This is fine. I'm not doing this for that. This is it. We're a group of awarenesses hanging out together, trying to figure out what the hell we're doing here. Isn't that what we always do together, one way or another? You all here, is it too weird? It's hard to know, Now, if you want to examine where you're standing in relation to stuff, take a look at your perceptions of the people around you. And I want to talk about the dimension of us and them. That is, who is it you are dealing with? Is your spouse her or him, or are you and your spouse us? Is your employee her or him, or is your employee us? Is your customer them, her, him, or is it us? Are your colleagues her, him, or are they us? Are your suppliers her, him, or are they us? Are your stockholders them or us? Clients, them, us, etc. Now, I want to give a naive story. This is one of my favorite stories. Many years ago, my father used to be president of the New York, New Haven, and Hartford Railroad. So he was a kind of mogul. For a Jew from Boston, that was good. And so in my early days, in my bearded dress and beads days, as Ram Dass, we did some radio shows on WBAI in New York, and we produced a record album, which was a beautiful record album called Love, Serve, Remember. And it was a beautiful box with beautiful stone printing, wonderful images and story. And I read from the Bible, I read from the Ramayana, we had telephone interviews, we had a record in there, the whole thing. It was a beautiful production for all these records, chanting and so on. And it was it was a mail order item for $4.50. Okay. Now my father looked at this. He didn't listen to it, but he looked at it. And he said, "Great product you got here." I said, "Yup." "Real quality?" He said, "Yup." He said, "You're only charging $4.50 for it." I said, "Yup." He said, "You know, you could probably get $10 for this." I said, "That's true." He said, "Would fewer people buy it at $10? I said, "No." And he was completely confused. He said, "I don't understand." He said, "Are you against capitalism? What's your problem? Free enterprise? Market economy?" I tried to think of how to talk to him, and I said, "Dad, do you remember last year?" Dad was a lawyer, a very good lawyer. I said, "Dad, remember last year you tried a case for Henry?" "Yeah." "Tough case, wasn't it?" "Damn right it was." Spent a lot of time preparing it. Jesus, I spent so much time. I was in the law library. Oh, it's a tough case. "Do you want it?" "Yeah." I said, "You know, you charge pretty good fees. I bet you charged Henry a nominal egg for that." Dad looked at me like I was crazy. He said, "What are you, out of your mind? It's Uncle Henry. How can I charge him?" I said, "There's my problem. You find somebody that isn't Uncle Henry, I'll rip him off." Now, it's naive, but just hear the story. Because let's say you would like to keep your heart open in life. Just say you would like to do that. Because it's really feeding to you to keep your heart open. Every time you live in your mindset of somebody being them, your mind cuts off your heart. That's what it does. So can you look at your customer and say, "Look, you're us. This is what my product costs. This is what I need to do to make a fair profit. I'm aware of what you need. I'm not going to get the maximum this that I can get from you by your naivete. I'm going to share with you actually what the situation is, take a fair return so that you and I can stay us. That's naive in the business world. But I just want to share it with you. I just want you to know the cost you're paying to be shrewd business people. And I'm talking about what kind of shrewd you really want. You do what you want. I'm just sharing with you my predicaments about charging for things and so on. So it seems to me the roles, the secret of the game as I understand it that brings about happiness is to learn how to fulfill our roles in life without being trapped by them. That is, when I say to you, who are you? What do you answer? You got a number of choices. I'm in the natural foods industry. That's a definition. That's an appropriate definition for this setting, I say. But you also have other definitions. I'm a woman. I'm a man. I'm an American. I'm not an American. I'm a Jew. I'm a Christian. I'm Islamic. I'm whatever, Taoist. I'm Latino Chicano. I'm African American. I'm Caucasian. I'm Polish, Russian, Jewish. All these identities. I'm a husband. I'm a father. I'm a mother. I'm a wife. I'm a member of the school committee. I'm a lover. I'm a person growing old. Look at all the roles you have. I was going to say going bald. Flashback, too many drugs. See, I went through a stage where I was so identified with my body, that's who I was, that when I started to go bald, I freaked. So who was I then? I was somebody busy not going bald. That's basically my identity, and I was aware of how bald everybody was around me all the time. So I had a long piece of hair, and I sort of wore it like this with a little stuff, and I was always aware of how the wind was blowing, you know? It was like... And now I'm bald. So I'm bald. So. Just like I'm 62. It's not, oh my God, I'm 62. I mean, this is the hand of a 62-year-old's decaying body. I mean, I can, keep it for a while longer and take better care of it, as all of you know. I was doing great. I got hired by La Prairie Cosmetics to speak at Saks Fifth Avenue in Beverly Hills during one of their, isn't this ghastly? But they were paying a lot of money, which brought eyesight to a lot of blind people in Nepal. And to take La Prairie's money and bring sight to, 500 blind people in Nepal seemed somehow I could sell my soul a little bit. And I could say whatever I wanted, so I could say the truth anyway. So we were at the luncheon beforehand, and there was the nutrition person, health nutrition person, and then there was the vice president of La Prairie and me at lunch. And there were all these other tables of patrons of Saks having lunch, learning how to keep their skin young. So the nutritionist said, we're going to do this little experiment. You hold your skin together for 5 seconds, see? And then after 5 seconds, you let it go, and you see how quickly it goes back. And that determines how youthful and vigorous your skin is, and we have cream that will help you. So we did it, and then we all had our hands in the middle, and I took my hands away, and it didn't go back at all. And they looked at me. They looked at me the way people looked at me when I'd just been thrown out of Harvard. You know, like, isn't it too bad about him? But my consciousness was clear enough to watch their minds creating that reality and then deciding whether that's one I wanted to buy into or not. And I would say you are in the midst of all of these projected realities about who you are. Whether you get caught in them is the art form. The art form is to be, as Christ said, in the world but not of the world. To be impeccable in each of your roles. Be an impeccable business person, an impeccable husband or wife, an impeccable mother, an impeccable member of the community, an impeccable part of the biotic system, an impeccable honoring of religion, race, etc. Play it cleanly. That's the only way you don't create karma. It's the only way you don't get stuck and they say take the third grade again. This is the advanced course for those of you. See, if I understand the game from a spiritual perspective now, I mean, I'm the Meshuggah one from out there talking. It's a Sanskrit word. If I'm looking at it from out there, I took birth. I was undifferentiated awareness with a karmic tail on me, and I took birth. A tale to be lived out. And I went immediately into somebody training. I mean, I didn't know who I was. I wasn't anybody. I was all of it. I thought the bedpost and me and my mother's breast were all one thing. I didn't know. Who told me this is you, that's not you? I don't know. But I learned. I got trained by people who thought they were somebody. So they're the best teachers because they can really teach it from the soul, you know. So somebody taught somebody to be somebody. So you went into somebody's, it's called socialization. If you didn't buy in, you became a blue baby and you split or autistic or something. So, and you just didn't buy in. Or you bought in, but you couldn't express it. I mean, there are different levels of whether you stay an angel or you become really humanized fully. Once the society was absolutely sure you had bought into somebodyness, then you went into somebody's special training. You notice how every one of you is special in some way? No matter how weird it is, everybody has something special. Hardly anybody says, I'm just like everybody else. Yeah, I'm special. And then that's all part of your culture, and that's part of your identifying with your separateness, which has in it all the things about survival and reproduction and safety in the situation. First three chakras. And you reproduce the species because you identify with the desire systems, you act on them, you reproduce. That's good for the species, more or less. Less, it turns out. There's another change. See, we used to live with be fruitful and multiply. It's turning out to be a rather questionable instruction, I would say. With awakening, something happens to some of us, and there's probably an inordinate number in this room, in this particular industry, because of where it came from. Somewhere along the line, you wake up and you realize you've been had. You realize that who you are caught in being, who you think you are, isn't indeed who you are. That who you are is much more interesting than who you think you are. But everybody told you who you think they think you are, and you bought it. In other words, you entered into a prison of consciousness, of conceptual consciousness, and ruled out everything else and said, this is who I am. And then you have these various roles, and you identify with them. I am a truck driver, but darling, we're in bed. No, I'm a truck driver. See, and you learn how to be flexible and give up one role, substitute for another role, and you move from role to role. But do you ever move back into awareness that has no role? That's the game. The game is to rest in consciousness that enters into roles. I am a lecturer, but I'm not a lecturer. I'm a being who happens to lecture. You are in the natural foods industry, natural food and health industry. But you're beings who are in the industry. This sounds like an absurd wisdom, but it's incredibly profound. Because to plumb the depths of who you are and to find the beingness that is then doing and not identify with the doing like the culture says, hi, what do you do? What do you do? Not what do you be? How you being? What are you doing? See, if you can rest in your beingness, which is behind all your unique stuff, and I can rest in my beingness behind all the unique stuff, you and I can meet as us. The minute I identify with my uniqueness, you become them. Because you're unique in a different way. You become him or her. In other words, can you and I find the balance between our separateness and our non-separateness? We got so caught in our separateness, we lost our non-separateness. If you read the current literature, you will see that our survival is intimately linked to our acknowledging ourselves as part of systems, as interdependent in an economic system, in social systems, in all kinds of institutions, in family. We threw out the family in favor of individualism, and now we're stuck without an extended family, which is part of the roles in society that give meaning to life. And we need them, if only for babysitters. Not only are we part of all these social systems, we are part of ecological, biotic systems. And to the extent that we act as if we are separate and don't act as if we are part of these systems, we are part of the ultimate destruction of the very system we're playing in, of life on Earth. But how do you change when you've been so cultivated into being somebody, trying to be successful, trying to achieve, trying to win? What is winning? Winning, from my point of view, is becoming free. Becoming free is not becoming free in the sense of external freedom, because you're never going to have that fully, because you're the part of social systems which define laws. It means being free inside. It means being identified with that part of you which is not bound by social role, bound by identities. To the extent that you are not bound, you are free. Now, if you are not bound, that means I am in this nice decaying vehicle, but I am not an identity with this vehicle. It is my part of my form, my package. It's my Ford, my Chevy, my BMW, whatever it is. My old 1931 model, something. Studebaker, Packard. But that's not who I am. The implication of having done the inner work to find out who you are and finding that part of you that lies behind your identity with social role allows you to rest in the part of yourself that is equanimous, that is peaceful. It allows you to be free of the fear of death, because that awareness has nothing to do with time. It's not coming, it's not going, it's not changing, it's who you are. It's that part of you that has no form, and if you only think what's real is what has form, we'll wait. We'll wait for a few more thousand incarnations till you're ready to recognize that who you are has no form, and yet it acts in form, and that's the paradox of it all. I have to end in 1 minute. I can go 3 minutes over, but you got to open your boots because there's money to be made. We'll go about 4 more minutes and I'll finish. I would just say that the art form is not being identified with role and yet fulfilling role. If you can stand back quietly by cultivating that quietness inside yourself, and it's worth it, and figuring out how to make your businesses collaborative to help you do that, rather than something you do at home hiding and then go to business, instead of just meeting with your business people. I mean, I go to business meetings in many organizations where they have a bell in the boardroom or the meeting room, and we go along, and then when it gets too head trippy or too caught, a bell is rung. It's called the keeper of the heart at a board meeting. And at that moment, everything stops and everybody takes 3 breaths and then goes on. I mean, that's a major thing. You don't have to be religious to do it. It's not spiritual. It's just reconnecting to here we all are in this room, caught in our minds for a moment, because the predicament is that our intellects are these incredible powers. Cleverness is a great siddhi or power. But the problem is it's a trap, because who you are is deeper than even your intellectual mind. You got to learn how to use it as a servant and not be ruled by it as a master. All of the efforts you're now making to be socially responsible, at this point, the way it looks now, are not going to be enough to save the game. I should think to let you know that it is not a matter of management, it's a matter of design. And there's a great article by Paul Hawkins in the current Utne Reader that I highly recommend to you. But as Gandhi said, what you do may seem insignificant, but it's very important that you do it. It's very important for you, and it's very important for all the rest of us that you do it, even though it may seem insignificant. I would say that if you're going to fill your business role impeccably, it can't be at the expense of fulfilling your role as a father or a mother. It can't be at the expense of your fulfilling your role as a member of the nation state. It can't be at the expense of your fulfilling your role as part of an ecosystem. So you and I are riding a dance of change and of no rule book as to how to play this one. The question is, what action do you perform that honors all of your roles as optimally as possible? That's the work. The only way you know which action that is by standing aside from identification with any of them to find the place to stand from which you can see how it is. The Tao says, the truth waits for eyes unclouded by longing. When you want something, you only see the outward container. You only see the projection of your own desires. So to the extent that you are identified as being a business person who wants a certain bottom line, that colors how you see the world. You don't see what is, you see what you are needing to see to win. But if you only are in that identification, you will lose the others. And you will not feel a sense of integrity. And if you don't feel a sense of integrity in your own being, you're ending up cutting yourself off from the universe, because you got to close down that one to do that one, and then you're going to close that one to do that one. And you watch people like doctors and nurses that go to the hospital and are professionally warm because they're afraid if they open their hearts, they'll break from so much suffering. And so they close their hearts and they become professionally warm. And then they think they can go home and not be professionally warm at home, and their marriages go all to hell. But they're afraid if their hearts are open, they'll burn out. And I am here to give testimony. It is possible to keep your heart open in hell if you know where to stand in your being, so that you're deeply involved in life and also perfectly equanimous. And if you're not living in that place, that's your business on earth, because that's the peace and equanimity and joy that you as an individual must bring to the system for the system to work.